Hi everyone, good Tuesday afternoon and welcome to GoLocal Live. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in as we are usually joined by Professor of Political Science Jennifer Lawless down at the University of Virginia. Jennifer, thank you for joining us today.
Of course.
Let's talk with some of the big news. Top of the day, new CNN poll out for the Democratic primary has Biden expanding his lead, Kamala Harris's numbers going down. And Joe Biden's wife, Jill, making some remarks today as well about supporting her husband. So let's talk about Biden in the spotlight.
Right. So the CNN poll, which, by the way, is one of the polls that the candidates can use to qualify for the next debate, was excellent news for Joe Biden, bad news for Kamala Harris, and everybody else pretty much stayed the same. So what we see here is Biden shoring up a double-digit lead, not only among moderates, but doing pretty well among liberals as well. He, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren are sort of in a three-way fight for the liberal vote, but he has a major edge among the moderates. And any gains that Kamala Harris made following her impressive first debate performance seem to have dissipated. She's now down to about 5% in the polls. So what this poll indicates is that we really got a three-person race in terms of the frontrunners and no longer a four-person race. And what we've seen over the course of the last week suggests that Biden's internal polling numbers indicate the same thing, and that's why he's been laying low. We haven't seen him make a lot of gaffes lately because he really hasn't been on the campaign trail. And in fact, his wife today tried to excuse any gaffes he would make by telling voters that even if they don't like him, even if they think he misspeaks, even if they don't love his policies, they have no choice but to vote for him if they want to defeat Donald Trump. It's not necessarily the ringing endorsement you want from your spouse, but the sentiment rings true.
Let's talk a little bit about Harris's numbers going down. As you said, they had seen a spike following her debate performance. Are the polls that fickle? If she hasn't done anything per se to really grab that headline or really be out there, is this just what we can expect from the campaign moving forward? Is a little volatility based on the week?
Certainly, and it's still too early to ensure or to say for sure that none of these candidates can rebound. But as we move further and further into the fall, it becomes more and more difficult for a candidate that looked like they were gaining momentum and then lost it to get it back. And this is sort of reminiscent of what we saw in 2012 and 2016 on the Republican side, where it was always this candidate whack-a-mole, right? So a candidate would rise and then the following week they'd fall. The two things that were consistent were Mitt Romney in 2012 was always in second place. So he was never the voters' top choice, but he was always the second choice. And in 2016, Donald Trump was always at the top and the second choice candidate kept moving around. And so usually when a candidate peaks, they don't peak again. Now, it's early, so it's possible that Harris's 12 points was not a peak, but I'd rather be going in Biden's direction than Harris's if I had to forecast the election right now.
Let's talk about numbers as well. The Fox polling that drew the ire of the president, showing, of course, head-to-head how he would fare against Democratic candidates. He was none too pleased.
Right, so basically every Democratic candidate would defeat Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was particularly disgusted by this because it was from a Fox News poll. Now, the important thing to keep in mind here is that although Fox News provides a lot of conservative commentary, they actually do have a news arm, and that news arm actually works with polling firms, and those polling firms actually conduct reputable polls, not much different than a CNN poll or a New York Times poll or a Washington Post poll. And so Donald Trump doesn't seem to differentiate between the editorial side of Fox News and a lot of the pundits and hosts of these programs and what actual polling numbers would indicate. And so it seems that he believes that he should be ahead in the Fox News polls because he's ahead among the Fox News commentators. And that's just not how polling works.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Of course, those in the political science field know this, but what he's signaling to the American public, clearly we saw polling and its advantages and disadvantages last time around. But, to have someone wholly discount a poll sort of based on a very visceral and personal reaction to it, how does that impact the average American?
Well, I think it has an impact on people in two different ways. For some set of people, they're just going to dismiss this and say, he's completely out of his mind. Does he not know how polls work? Does he not understand the way the news media operate? And can he not differentiate between fact and punditry? For another group of the American public who don't really know about how these polls work at all, I think they're going to be a little bit perplexed, because if they're going to believe Donald Trump, then they're also going to have a hard time understanding why it is that he's usually touting Fox News. So what did he do that all of a sudden caused Fox News not to like him? And that creates some sort of cognitive dissonance in the minds of a lot of voters as well. So it just doesn't seem like an argument that he should be pushing forward. It also doesn't seem like an argument that gets him anything. His base is not going to believe any poll that has him underperforming because they love him. People that believe in polls are going to look at them and assess the actual results. And a lot of people that can't stand Donald Trump are just thrilled that these are the results. So it's unclear what the gain is for, sort of bashing the news organization in this way.
We had talked last week, of course, about how Bernie Sanders had some ire for the Washington Post about his coverage, said it was very similar to that of the president's as well, in this case, Fox News. Let's talk a little bit about Sinclair Broadcasting. GoLocal Prov had reported this week a little changing commentary, if you will, by them, from Boris Epshteyn to former Fox employee Eric Bolling, who was fired with sexual misconduct allegations, now at Sinclair. A couple of very soft interviews on the president. Could Sinclair be the new Fox?
It's a little bit more difficult for Sinclair to be the new Fox in that they're not cable news. So they have the opportunity and the ability to, in a lot of ways, infiltrate even more than Fox News does, because so many of these local affiliates now air their stories. But it's not 24/7. And so it's difficult, I think, to have the kind of systematic reach and the beating of that drum that the way Fox News would have. The other thing to keep in mind is that Sinclair still has to pretend to have some sort of fair and balanced view, because, again, it is not a cable news network that's able to devote several hours a day to explicit political commentary. So, I don't think that what we see is that surprising, but I do think that it's going to be a little bit less likely for the organization itself to sort of tout that they proudly purport a conservative line.
Let's talk a little bit about a former Trump employee at the White House, the Anthony Scaramucci show.
He's my favorite cable news personality. So Anthony Scaramucci, who became very, very famous and well known for saying things that were completely ridiculous, is at it again, although this time he seems to have gotten on the bandwagon of believing that Donald Trump is actually crazy. And so his view is that Donald Trump will be replaced by the party with somebody else by March of 2020, and that he personally is going around and soliciting support from various former cabinet officials and high-ranking Republicans to depose Donald Trump. I have no question in my mind that Scaramucci believes this and believes that it's possible. I am more doubtful that he will actually be able to bring this plan to fruition.
There have been some questions. I did see an interview with him, was asked, is he doing this for his own personal gain?
Every minute that he's on TV is for his own personal gain. Now, at this point, he's saying things that I think Democrats and independents are more comfortable with than when he was defending the president last year at this time. But I think we should make no mistake that there's a clear reason that he's doing this. He's not working behind the scenes. He's a very, very vocal spokesperson for his cause. I wouldn't be surprised if he's trying to parlay this into some sort of punditry or commentary position at one of the networks.
So let's talk about the week moving forward when we catch up with you again next week before you take off for a big conference in D.C. What are we keeping an eye on?
Well, obviously, we'll continue to see the candidates on the Democratic side scramble to qualify for the next debate. They only have a little bit more than a week left to meet the polling threshold and to get 130,000 donors. And what we're seeing now is really quite distasteful. It's not the candidates' fault, but every time you turn on the TV, every time you click on an internet story, they're basically directing you to their website so that you can give just $1, because they need 130,000 individual donations. They can be as little as $1, but that's what's required to qualify. And so, I think that we're going to see that kind of pandering for the next couple of weeks. The other thing that seems to me to keep an eye on is the undoing of Donald Trump. It looks like in the last week or so, he seems to be coming undone. He's picking fights with people he doesn't typically pick fights with. He is also, I think, getting a little bit concerned about the economic news and the fact that he might not have a strong economy, or at least as strong an economy as he's represented it, to run on in 2020. And without that, and with discussion of a recession, regardless of whether we're actually in a recession or not, he's on less firm footing.
And I think we had talked a little bit about that prior. Again, he's claiming that it's the left-leaning media that's harping on this potential for a recession, sort of warning, if you will. But will not, in fact, the numbers speak for themselves when they hit the polls? And more importantly, sort of how voters feel in their pocketbook?
So there are a couple of different things to keep in mind here. The first is that Donald Trump has never been one to care that much about facts or about reality or what people actually feel. He tells them what they feel, and he hopes that that comes true. So I don't know that those realities will shape his rhetoric. As far as the voters themselves are concerned, it's a little bit of a mixed bag because the economic signals and performance indicators aren't all moving in the same direction. So unemployment is still very solid and is not increasing a lot. There still is consumer spending, but the question is, there's a lot of uncertainty. How long can this go on? And what about tariffs with China? What about other economic decisions that the president makes? What happens with interest rates? The president has already now said that it's the Fed's fault. I don't know that most voters differentiate between Donald Trump and Jerome Powell when they make a decision on Election Day.
Well, we're going to continue to keep an eye on what's happening inside the Beltway and outside. And as always, we appreciate Professor of Political Science at the University of Virginia, Jennifer Lawless, for Skyping in.
Thanks.
Okay, we're going to let Jennifer go, and we're actually going to get to be talking about the latest in the stock market here. John Kuzmarski with Efficient Capital Strategies will be with us in just one moment.